The new month approaches, which means it's time to get set up in our journals. I mean, technically speaking, I did set this one up a week ago, and I am certainly glad that I did, because it took me quite a while. In terms of the actual setup itself, it took about 3 hours of filming, and then once you cut out all of the parts where it's me sitting there umming and ahhing about where to place something on the page, then it really only took an hour and a half, but all of the pre-planning time that went into this setup took way longer than expected. One of the ways I did choose to speed myself up though was to print off my headers in advance, but this also means trying to make full use of the paper that I print on, because it's a washi sticker paper, and thus trying to think of every single header I'm going to need for the entire month. I do think that they turned out cute though, and I know that some of the time added to my overall setup time was just me trying to individually cut out each of the headers, mainly because I still haven't worked up the courage to use my Cricut, and my office is currently a mess because I'm still in the middle of my office revamp project, but I think that they look really cute with the theme that we're doing today. In terms of the decoration for today's setup, in a recent stationery haul, I got an absolutely gorgeous roll of PET tape that I knew I wanted to use pretty much as soon as possible, and if the tape on the page didn't already give it away, the color palette of this one is a little bit different to what we've had over the past 2 months, so going for a really nice contrast of black and red. The tape that I'm using for the main decoration does have some holographic foiling in it as well, which is really pretty, but as always I've linked all of the materials I've used in the description box. I feel like recently I've been falling into a bit of a routine with my planner in setting up the same layouts month over month, which in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but one of the things that I really like about bullet journaling is the ability to change things up and do things differently each month. After a recent conversation on the Planner Pals podcast, I decided to make some changes to the layout we're working on here. This one is my reflections page, and I like to keep this at the start of the setup rather than the end, because when I come back to this setup in, future months, future years, it effectively acts as a summary of things that happened. For the past couple of months, I've really just made these very goal focused, so thinking about what wins or accomplishments did I have, what challenges did I face, any lessons that I learned, and then also sections about memories and then needs and things to try in my journal. But given that aforementioned podcast conversation, I decided it would probably be a good idea to include some other sections in here as well. Those ones I'm going to be putting on the right hand side of the spread, next to my working on section. This one is also getting a bit of an adjustment. Usually I only have my actions list, or the things that I'm doing for my goals, and then a short summary of the projects that I've been working on. But I also wanted to include tasks here, mainly for things that aren't goal related, but I'd like to do them this month in particular. Effectively, that means that actions are tasks that I do for goals, tasks are just any individual to-do list items, and then projects are things that I'm working on that require multiple steps. It's not necessarily the most perfect breakdown in terms of a task list, but it does help give me just a little bit of structure in this section so that I kind of know where to go for what type of information. For instance, some of my goals are project-based, so they will end up in the projects list. The steps that I need to take to work on those though, they'll end up in the actions list. As for those other sections that I wanted to include in my reflections though, the two that I'm adding here are a space for my favorites for the month, so things like my favorite movie that I watched, favorite meal that I ate, maybe if there's a particular song that I had on repeat, I can put that down in here too. And then I also wanted to have a space for a level 10 life check-in. This is effectively where I just go through each of the categories in my life, different life areas, and give them a rating out of 10. You may notice that some of the labels for the life areas actually start to encroach on where the graph kind of section of this is going to go. Originally I was very much just trying to keep it in that very left-hand column and not kind of creep into the section for each of the numbers. But when I made a mistake on the home environment section, I just figured that I'd include all of the text of each of the categories and just hope that I don't have anything rated as a 1. The way that I'm going to fill that one in is effectively just by drawing a line coming out of the text, so it looks more like a stylistic choice rather than a mistake that I had to fix. Jumping back and having a look at how this month has been going in my journal though, I've really enjoyed the coffee theme, even though it was technically a theme that I said I'd never do because I don't really drink coffee. I had a lot of fun with the palette and using the grid washi tape, and also the little pop of teal green that I put next to each of the headers. In terms of the tape itself, it does have a lot of quotes related to coffee and being a coffee lover, which I didn't use the majority of because I don't drink coffee. Things like coffee will always be my first love and stuff like that don't really apply, and that did mean that a lot of the designs on the tape, being those text-based designs, I didn't use, which meant I ended up using a lot of double ups of the more picture-based elements. While that isn't necessarily a bad thing, I do wish that I had a little bit more variation in the decoration, and that's why I'm very glad that the tape I'm using in this setup has a very long repeat and a lot of individual elements that aren't text-based. I still got some space to work in here because I still, at the point of setting this up, had about a week and a half to use that setup, and then we're flipping past the working on and reflection space to get into my cyclic overview. Now typically when I set up a cyclic overview, it's only for the 4 weeks of the cycle, but because September butts up against reset week, which is the 13th week of each quarter of the year, I wanted to include that on here as well, just so that I have a space to write down any events that might be happening. I've been finding over this month and last month that I've actually been using my monthly log. I very much hope that I'm not jinxing it by saying that, but while previously my monthly log was really just to capture events, I've been a little bit more lenient about this now and also using it to record tasks that need to happen on specific days. Because over the last year and a bit, I've been transitioning more to daily logs rather than weekly logs. I don't necessarily have that space to record day-specific tasks that aren't for the day that I'm currently working on. The monthly log has been a useful place to drop those though, and it's also making me use my monthly log more, which I think is a bonus. If you bullet journal, I'd love to know which of the core collections you have the most trouble with. If you need a refresher, those are the index, future log, monthly, weekly, and daily logs. And although I don't use an index in my everyday journal, and I do barely use my future log, I've always thought of the monthly log as being my biggest problem point. I guess that's the nice part about making your own planner and bullet journaling though, you can include what you want and not include what you don't. In terms of the structure of the layout though, this is done as a calendar, so I'll have 4 days on the left-hand page and 3 days on the right. Each daily box is going to be 3 centimeters across by 3 centimeters down, but then also with an additional ½ centimeter to capture the number for each of those days. Normally when I do my setups, I try to make things very cohesive. I try to make sure that I'm using, every second line highlights consistently throughout the setup, consistently either putting sections in boxes or not in boxes. This time around, I wasn't super consistent with the boxing of different sections. For instance, on the reflections page and working on sections, I didn't use any boxed sections. I just had everything free floating. Whereas for this calendar, I had it fully enclosed, and then on some of the future layouts, I have sections that are boxed or not boxed as well. I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about that. I'm considering maybe going back in and putting them in boxes, just so that everything's kind of matchy-matchy. But then if I have everything boxed, I also feel like I need to have my daily logs boxed, and that adds a lot of kind of administrative work in each of my daily log setups, which I don't really enjoy having. At least if I leave it as a mix of boxed and unboxed, it means that my daily logs don't have to be boxed and they won't look weird not being boxed. Now, as I've said the word boxed way too many times and it's lost all of its meaning, as you can see, we're numbering the calendar. This one doesn't actually start on the first day of the month. That's because my cycles don't start with the month starts. My September cycle actually runs from the 26th of August through to the 22nd of September, and then reset week is going to be from the 23rd to the 29th. Quarter 4 is going to be the first quarter this year that doesn't start on the first day of a month, which is going to be a little bit interesting. But what's going to be even more interesting is if I maintain this cyclic planning next year, because that one is technically going to start before the end of the year. That one is definitely a future me problem though. I'm trying not to think about my next year plans or planning system, what journals I'm using, at least until the end of September, even though those thoughts have started to creep in already. But on to the next layout. On this one, we're setting up a space to track my self-care routines. This is a layout that I bought back in August because I really noticed that I wasn't making time for myself. I needed to take care of myself a little bit better, and I've been finding the layout has been working well, so I figured I'd continue it for the month ahead. The types of self-care that I'm tracking on this are things like getting better sleep routines in terms of when I'm getting up or going to bed, making sure that I'm getting some water intake in the form of water, dental care, making sure that I'm taking my medications, anything like that. All of these kind of executive functioning things that I have a tendency to let slide if I'm not paying attention to them. Part of the tracking is for accountability, to make sure that I actually do the things, and I also find that it can help me a bit with my motivation. There's something very satisfying about having things checked off on a tracker, and for August in particular, I was keeping a week-by-week total to see how much of each of these things I was doing, mainly so I could see any problem areas and any of the habits or routines that I'm trying to maintain that I was neglecting time and time again. For September, I won't be doing the weekly totals, mainly because I couldn't fit them on the end of the layout. I decided to put reset week on here as well so that I don't have to set up like an entire new tracker just for reset week. So instead, I'm going to have a total over the entire 5-week period and then a rank of how successful I was in each of those different routines. Whatever has rank 1 is going to be the thing that I completed the most or the most consistently, and whatever has the highest number in terms of its rank means it was the least completed. When it comes to these styles of trackers, typically I like to use icons to represent each of the things I'm keeping track of, and to make sure that I know what each of them mean, I also make sure to include a key on the page. The rest of the layout outside of the header though is just going to get filled with decoration. This did require some umming and ahhing on my part to figure out which pieces of tape I wanted to put where and to figure out which of the PET elements actually fit into the space I had, but I think it turned out fairly well and I'm looking forward to using this one for a second month in a row. If you were looking to use a layout with this kind of structure but didn't necessarily need a self-care routines layout, this could just be a general habit tracker, so listing out the different habits that you want to keep track of or build into your routines. You can use icons similar to what I've gone with, or if you're going with just a monthly view, not 35 days like I have, there would be enough space to write out what the habits are going vertically up the page. I decided that the washi tape that I put down initially on this page didn't look quite right. I found that pairing up the black and the plaid tape together worked better than using the grid and the plaid, but that's the nice part about washi tape, it's fairly easy to pull it off the page provided it's not too sticky. As for the page that's on the right hand side, this is going to be for a self-care bingo board. The idea here is that it's just a grid of whatever dimensions you want. Last month it was a 3x3, and for September I'm going with a 4x4 because I wanted to include more self-care activities. Also, I figured I'd use this one across 5 weeks, not just 4, so there's more of an opportunity to get things done. The idea is though, with that grid or board, you just fill it in with different self-care activities that you want to do, and then as you complete them, you color them in or check them off. Because I wanted to keep the same lettering style that I've been using for the headers, I decided to print mine off on the washi sticker paper and then just stick that directly into my notebook. I made sure to size it so that it would sit exactly on top of the dot grid, and thankfully it did work out. And then the rest of the page just gets decorated with more of the PET elements and the washi tape. Again, if you like the idea of the layout but you don't necessarily want it to be a self-care bingo, you can do this for other things. Previously, I've used this style of layout for things like a monthly bucket list, or just little tasks, projects, whatever that I wanted to get done in that month in particular. You can also use it for specific goals that you're working on, so maybe if you have a physical health goal, you could populate it with different things that you want to do to work on that. Even set yourself up some rewards for getting the first vertical, horizontal, diagonal. I tend not to set rewards for each of mine, mainly because doing these tasks feels fulfilling like a reward would, but in thinking about the self-care activities I want to do, I try to be fairly holistic in my self-care. So it's got things like time off, but it's also got things related to social connection, and it's also got things related to leisure and fun, and it's also got things related to life admin and getting my shit together. What you populate this with is completely up to you, but it is just a fun layout that you can include. One of the ways that I've been trying to tackle monthly setup monotony and having the same layouts time and time again month after month is that in this journal in particular, I've been using project layouts. Because the specific project that I'm working on with each given month changes, it means that the structure of these layouts change as well. Not only is it a great way to kind of like flex my creative muscles and think about the best way to set up a layout for the particular type of project, but it's also a really good way to get my projects done. I have a lot of projects on my future me problems list, things that I want to get done at some point, but they weren't necessarily time pressured enough to do in any given month. But setting up these projects list has just helped me be a little bit more mindful about the fact that I want to get these done and then actually make the plans to get them accomplished. My main project for July was the summer creative retreat and preparing for that. For August, the project has been my office reset or revamp. Kind of reorganizing everything, decluttering, getting new furniture, just rejigging my setup. But for September, I have 2 projects in mind. The first one is my end of year content planning, just kind of getting ahead and getting in the know about what's going to be coming out on the channel in the kind of last 2 months of the year in particular. So this is all of those typical end of year videos like wrap-ups, getting set up for the new year, that kind of thing. And then also Vlogmas. We will again be doing a video per day for every day of December, so make sure you're subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of those. But the other project that I really want to work on, and definitely have been neglecting, is my budgeting. When I was a teacher, doing my budgeting was more so just a thing that I did to keep track of my finances, make sure I kind of had my finger on the pulse when it came to how much money we had coming in or going out. But now that I work for myself, it's a lot more important that I stay on top of these things to make sure that I don't end up completely stuffing up during tax season or just sending myself into a complete panic because I haven't done it for the last 6 months or whatever. We'll talk more about that project when we actually start setting up the sections for it though. But as said, the first project that I'm really working on are those end of year plans. In terms of the sections that I'm using for that project, we have the grid at the top of the left hand page. This one represents all of the weeks that'll be left in the year from about mid-October onwards, and then I've coloured in grey when we're going to have a video release. This doesn't include podcasts, I didn't put those on here, but it does include anything that's coming out on the channel or any videos that are member exclusives. Underneath that is just going to be a small section for a task list, because the tasks that I'll be doing in September in particular are really just organising the calendar, brainstorming points, thinking about the sequencing of the videos, when I'm going to work on them, that kind of thing. And then the 2 columns that follow this is actually to list out what those videos are. I'm not sure at this stage if I'm going to use that space as a checklist for the videos. I might end up setting up another spread which dives a little bit deeper into each of the steps that I need to do to work on those, but I think that having a summary list at the very least is going to be quite useful. As for the budgeting project though, this one has a few more sections, but they are all list based, with the small one on the bottom left of that page being for my budget population. This is just looking through all of our bank statements, anything we've paid for in cash, any kind of receipts, and logging that in my finance tracker. That one's done in Excel, it's really easy to use. But then the other sections I have are financial trackers, so thinking about maybe updating that budgeting spreadsheet and having some different graphs in there or something that kind of summarize my spending. I have a section for bill logging, which is effectively just writing down all of the bills that we have coming in on different time spans, so whether they be annual, quarterly, monthly, whatever else. I also have a space for Henry logging, HNRY, because that's the person who does my tax, and I need to go into there and make sure I've logged all of my business expenses with their receipts. And then I also want to do some financial goal setting, because this is something that Vogel and I don't really actively do, and I think it would be good to have a better idea of what we're both aiming for in terms of finances, whether that be for like home costs, project-based things, or just personal income goals. I know that getting this project done in particular is going to be such a weight off my soul. It's been kicking around on my task list for many moons now, especially logging business expenses, because I haven't done that for this financial year at all. I want to do future me a favor and have that done by the end of September though. I'd love to know though, what kind of projects or goals were you hoping to work on in September? Are you setting up any layouts in your planner specifically dedicated to those? Or are you just going to be adding things to your regular weekly and daily task lists? Having a look at the layouts that we set up in this one, I really love this black, white, and red color palette. I think the contrast is really fun. It's nice to step away from the more kind of browns and beiges that I've been using over the past couple of months, and I'm very excited to use more of this tape. If you wanted more inspiration for your September setup though, then the playlist on screen is the next one to check out. That one has all of my previous September setups, including one of my most favorite themes that I've ever done, and that one was a Fireflies theme, which looked so visually impactful, but was actually quite easy to do. Click or tap on that one though, and I'll see you over there.